Hello and welcome to the EchoChamber podcast. My name is Tony Groves and today we're taking the Tortoise Shack on the road. As always, I'm joined by my co-host and the man who can't actually stay in Dublin city centre for too long before the shop security guards get nervous. Martin Sticky Fingers McMahon is in town. Everybody, was it all the razors and boots you steal for that head of yours? Or?
Well, there's sort of creams that you can get. Hopefully that they'll grow some hair. We'll try. Let's go.
Regain isn't working, or Rogaine as it's called.
Caffeine stuff.
Much more importantly, we're delighted to be joined in the mobile Tortoise Shack by activist campaigner and new board member of the Irish Council for Civil Liberties, Suzy Byrne. Suzy, thank you for letting us come to you.
Thanks very much for coming to visit.
No, it's great to finally meet you. I know when we first touched base, it was a clumsy Tony Groves typical 2-footed approach, and the only thing that got me in the door was she said, "Oh, well, Izzy says you're all right," and she's not denying it either.
No, anything in Izzy. If you pass the Izzy test, then you're definitely past muster.
Yeah, well, look, that was it. Was Izzy was DJing last night? Did you see this?
I heard. I haven't seen any pictures.
I saw 2 pictures now, and I don't know what the angry punk rock set would have been like, but there you go. Leitrim, yeah. No, look, thanks so much for letting us come into you. And I'm going to go in. Obviously, I've said you're recently appointed to the Irish Council for Civil Liberties, and I remember we sat down with Tom Clonan a few months ago, and he spoke about his son and some of the difficulties that they'd had, and he made the point that his son needs to give 24 hours notice if he wants to get a dart. And he made it. It's
4 hours notice now on a pilot project since January.
Yeah,
I just put my Irish Rail board member hat on, and it's only been a week, 10 days, but it's 4 hours notice for a dart under a new initiative with the National Disability Inclusion Strategy.
Yeah.
So it's 24 hours if it's a train, and it's 24 hours if it's bus air. Dublin bus, you should be able to get on a bus, all right, and the Lewis, you get on a Lewis. That's if you have a physical disability. That's first at the beginning of all of this. Disability for me is, first of all, it's a disabling society. So it's society that disables me. But, disability people only think about ramps. They only think about accessible toilets. They don't think about the attitudes that are needed. They don't think about sensory issues. We have 13% of the population are disabled. That's over 600,000 people. And many of those, it is an intellectual disability, it is mental health difficulties, it is autism. There are a lot more than people with physical disability.
And that's actually, again, to me, it's one of those moments where someone hits you in the face, because if you remember, Martin, when we were lucky enough to sit down with Owen O'Brien and we talked about the housing crisis and we spoke about, these were the solutions, and Owen more or less verbally clattered me around the head and said I was showing a lack of ambition and I hadn't included people with disabilities or special needs or they had all of these certain, and he was right. I had literally neglected. We don't.
It's not included in the discourse at all. And you look alarmingly now the use of the nursing home. The private nursing home now is the new institution in Ireland. We have over 1,300 that we know of, younger people under 65 in nursing homes. Because for many of them, they might need full care, but it may not need to be nurse-led care. It could be social care. But because we have a housing crisis and an adaptable housing crisis as well, and hugely as well, which we don't talk about, people are being institutionalised. Many people go into hospital and they don't come out of hospital, or they can't leave hospital because they've nowhere to go to. And that can be people with mental health difficulties as well. It could be people who have a brain injury or need, additional forms of support, and it is easier, and I use that term very advisedly, easier for them to go to a nursing home than to set up social housing. The other thing that we are seeing, and we could spend our time just talking housing, the people who are homeless, who have an intellectual disability or who have autism, or on the spectrum, who are in homeless services or on the cusp of being homeless or hidden homeless. We're not counting those numbers. So I'm not arguing for institutionalisation, but far from it. But because we are closing down congregated settings. We are not replacing those with anything except the assumption that families will care for their family member forever. We have institutionalised people within their families. And we have presumed that carers, family members, will care for people forever, you know, and that's infantilising people, you know.
Well, it's adult children of elderly parents, and there comes a stage when elderly parents simply cannot cope with that. They simply can't.
And that's painting us as a burden, and I say us as a disabled person. That is all we are being painted as. The only narrative is about increased residential places or increased respite, as if that is all we are entitled to, rather than sitting down with us. Because when you're in school, you actually get good supports, generally all right. Now, I know people are always looking for special needs assistance and different things, but there is an obligation on the state when you were under 18 to support you through your education. And if you're lucky enough to be able to go to third level, disability services in third level colleges are very good in this country, generally. But when people leave school or leave education, they suddenly meet their disability head on again, because there is no right to anything. And there is a presumption that you will stay at home with mommy and daddy when your brothers and sisters go through the rites of passage in their lives, get married, move out, buy a house or rent or whatever. Renting for people with disabilities isn't in the narrative because, first of all, the locations aren't there, the money isn't there. You don't get to go and share flats with friends or, you know, do various things as a disabled person. It is presumed that you would stay at home with mum and dad. And then the narrative is painted, oh, mum and dad can't cope anymore. And so you are a burden, rather than the fact that it is society that is disabling you. It is the disabled person who's seen as a burden and painted as that. And then the minister comes along with his money for respite, and that's a little bit of a stick and plaster. You know, our planning around it, and that, I mean, goes back to our whole attitude. I have been very strong, I suppose, in saying for the last 15 years, we have regressed in Ireland around disability. In the 1990s and the early 1990s, we had a disability rights movement in this country. We had people breaking out, moving and doing things. The independent living movement, you know, there was a rights-based narrative. And when the recession hit, we went straight back into charity mode. It was all wrapped in buckets. It was cuts, yeah, it was terrible, but we can't do anything for you. And the whole rights thing is gone. And we, even though we're so-called out of recession, that rights thing hasn't come back again. Yes, we ratified the convention earlier this year, but we haven't ratified the optional protocol, which allowed people to take cases on the convention. Nobody really knows what the convention means.
That was a real interesting take, because we were the last country to ratify the protocol, and then we went and did it without the actual option to take, in effect, to actually enforce it in terms of, you know, there's no point saying that we have a regulator in place and then saying that the regulator that you can't actually enforce any repercussions for failures to adhere to it. That goes back to, I think, what recently someone called the spirit of it. It's almost like signing up to the spirit of something.
And sure, nobody knows what it means. Nobody knows how to use it. There's a list of all these clauses and we should be doing certain things. And yes, you could point to decisions and policies that are made that are in the spirit of the convention and meet the obligations aren't. But we don't, with individuals, sit down with them and say, you are a person, you are a citizen, what do we need to do to help you? It is all waiting lists, grace and favour, who you know, what list and what service you might be able to get. You're not sitting down with somebody and saying, right, what do you need at this stage of your life? If something changes in 5 years' time, we'll be able to work with you then. There's none of that, you know.
Well, we spoke to Tom about this, and it has to be, for parents of children with a disability, and particularly those with a hidden disability, and it's even worse with a hidden disability, that there is no cradle-to-grave plan. And that for elderly parents with a disabled child, the worry, the absolute angst that they go through, that there is no set out plan for how this person is going to live, where they're going to live, how they're going to be productive members of society. And that's what's been taken away from people, is the ability to be a productive member of society. And with the right supports, pretty much everybody can contribute in some way. But if you don't give people the supports, if you pull them away from them, what do they do? They're left, and as you say, the state makes a burden of them.
Yeah, we've even introduced the carers allowances. That's institutionalisation. It's trapping people at home with their families, right? Trapping the carer, but it's also trapping the person being cared for. Very rarely is the person being cared for asked, do you want to be cared by this adult? I know people, men in their 30s and 40s, who are being showered by their mother and do not want that in their lives, you know, and then they may not, and if it's not available to have somebody to come into the house, families don't like having strangers coming into houses, things like that. All these things come up. But we have institutionalised people by bringing in carers allowance, and it's quite, you know, it's a difficult thing to say because I think people need to be paid for their work, and caring is not something that people should be doing for free. I argue that, you know, paid staff, and we're in a situation at the moment, it's very hard to recruit staff to work in social care because the pay is so low. People are having huge difficulties in moving out of congregated settings because they can't recruit staff. And then family carers who are receiving carers allowance, those that meet the means test, and that's another issue in itself. But that's actually stopping people, some people, from moving out of home because that's an income coming into the family.
Yes.
You know, and so that's caused a huge difficulty for some people that want to move out because mum was getting carers allowance. So we have to talk about that issue as an issue in supporting people. And if farmers, when they're retiring, can get deals done so the young farmer can take over the land, right? Why can't people with disabilities who want to move out be supported to do so and be safe in the knowledge that their families are not going to suffer because they move out to get on with their lives?
And isn't it funny when you talk about, say for a simple thing like an infrastructure project that we're talking about, we want to develop bike lanes, we want to develop all of our road network, and we want to develop public transport, and we're talking now in terms of environmental impacts of transport. And one of the tenets I've seen in all of the reports is to give people the ability to work flexibly, work from home, give them all of these new things. And yet we're saying to people who have whatever range of disabilities they are, that that doesn't really include you. That's more for the guy who can plug. You know, we are actually we're not thinking broad enough about this.
No, and it's one of the things that I know people that are working in the area of assistive technology are campaigning on. Siobhan Long in Enable Ireland and many others were talking about having the right to an assistive technology passport, so that people can. There are so many solutions out there that can support people to be more independent and have more choice in their lives. And I think some people can see assistive technology as sort of like a caretaking device to lower the cost of labour.
Yeah.
There's a danger in that. There's also a danger when you look at assistive technology that it is like people are wearing bracelets to mark themselves in some way or monitor or be monitored. So we have to have those debates as well. But in terms of assistive technology being an enabling feature, people generally only access it because it's not because we have a huge budget for it, right? But also it's probably who you know, maybe being part of some research project gets you access to it or something like that, you know. But like people, things are vast out there. The opportunities are vast for people's phones to be able to control and do certain apps that would do everything from closing curtains to choosing TV channels to, you know, setting heating systems, all of those sorts of things that could be there to give people more independence.
Yeah.
And the right to that, we've no right to it. You know, you've no right to, like the Disability Act, and we have this whole tradition in Ireland of bringing in legislation and not fully commencing it. Disability Act 2005, not fully enacted, so people don't even have the right to an assessment, never mind the right to have the findings of that assessment carried out. You know, the Education Special Needs Act before that, not fully implemented. The Citizens Information Act, not fully implemented. The Assisted Decision Making Act of 2015, huge issue. We're waiting for that legislation, which was passed 3 years ago, to be fully enacted and everything to be in place. In the meantime, down the High Court, Justice Kelly is making words of court.
Yeah.
In an 1871 Lunacy Act, right? All he can do, the HSE are bringing people who are at risk, who need protection of the court. There are no other options, wardship. They have no right to travel, receive money, decide anything for themselves once they're made a ward of court. And because we have no rights to social care, most of those people are ending up in institutional care where, I'm not saying they're not being well cared for. I'm sure many places are well run, but they are still cages.
Well, I had the opportunity, unfortunately recently, my grandmother passed, but she was in a nursing home, and there were 2 young people in that nursing home, and they were lucky in that it was a lovely place, they were well taken care of, but it was sensory deprivation. It was, how do they become part of the world? And it's literally just outside the door, it's within reach. But there was no access for them.
So they don't have any money. Once you pay your residential charge, you're left with €30 or whatever of your money a week. And where can you go on that? And remember, a lot of nursing homes are way out of the town.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? And there's no way of accessing transport. You can't actually, if you need staff support to leave there, you can't get it internally because they don't have the staff. And once the HSE are funding your place in a nursing home, they say to you, we won't be able to give you PA hours, or we'll only give you so many, and they won't be able to help you access transport anyway. So why would you have a PA, if you can't go anywhere? And it's really difficult, and people go, oh, it's a temporary measure. But if you don't have the right to access a social worker or an occupational therapist, because many people who move into nursing homes don't again get to access primary care, and you need primary care to support you. The whole idea was to mainstream all these services so that you wouldn't have specialist services anymore. You'd have primary care, but once you go into a nursing home, you can often not access primary care, so you're stuck, and that's that permanent state of stuckness. And
doesn't matter how fancy the cage is; it's still a cage.
Not exactly. And there was a judge in England talked about a guilty cage is still a cage, And this is what families are looking at, futures for people, and they worry about what's going to happen in the future. And what we see is a scramble for residential rather than a scramble for the rights and the planning and the sitting down with families. And I do think there are families, I'm heartened to see many parents now saying, I want something different for my disabled child. I want them to have the same rights as everybody else, and the same expectations, and fight for that. So the narrative can change, the campaign can change. We need the reception, the other end, in terms of politicians and the law and everything like that to change as well. And we need to not fall into the trap of rattling buckets for everything. One of the big things, the other thing that really gets my goat, is GoFundMe campaigns for wheelchairs, Kickstarters or whatever, for essential equipment.
Yeah.
And people buy into that. It's really I feel like March woman for putting my hand up and saying, I am not retweeting that link. I do not think you should be doing this. You should be ensuring that the HSE, as the funder for health and social care, is making sure that the needs of that person is met, and not buying into this whole thing of, oh, well, we can't get that, so we'll raise a few bob, and his needs are looked after, and it lets everybody off the hook.
It's a scary thought, but it was something that actually I took a picture of it the other day, and I haven't posted it online, but because I need to crop it and edit it. But I saw a DR Dublin Regional Homeless Executive brand new van driving up the road. And on it, so it said DRHEA, and then underneath it said, in association with Peter McVeary and Focus Ireland. And I thought to myself, oh wow, we're branded on the side of a van as and when you look at how the state pay those organisations, they call them state provided service funding. That shouldn't be the case. And
it's the same with all the disability services.
That's my point. I'm broadening it.
They're all funded by the state, but people who are in receipt of those services don't realise it. You're trying to say to people, it's the HSE paying for you to attend this service. It is not X charity who's out doing fundraising campaigns at Christmas. Yes, that is for certain services, buildings, whatever, but 80% plus of the cost of whatever service you're receiving is funded by the state. And so you should have expectations to choice in that service. And if you don't like it, to go and choose something else. And we may come into that with personal budgets. There was a big report launched a few weeks ago about personal budgets, but it'll take a very long time for that to be brought in. since we don't sit down and plan anything with disabled people on a one-to-one basis generally, when are we going to start bringing in personal budget narrative, and planning into any of this and tell people you have 100,000 for your sports, how would you like to spend it? That's what people want to do. Many people do. Other people are afraid of it, and rightly, it's it can be complicated. They just want people to turn up, and to give them the support that they need. They don't want to have to be organising it as well. That's fine.
Yeah.
So bring in brokerage, bring in whatever is needed to support people on that. But we need to go back to the discussion at the beginning about people with disabilities being seen as rights holders. And, I know people are talking about, yes, equality type campaigns, but we don't need any more campaigns around disability. Really, as in be nice to your local wheelchair user, or, it's like the baby on board stickers. They're just waiting for something to arrive for, I have an invisible disability.
Is this the stickers that they've introduced for Dublin Bus?
Yes. I'm waiting for the disability.
It's a very unusual thing that we have to now, 2018, we need a sticker to talk about what used to be common courtesy.
Absolutely. And, it's like you haven't to be grateful for everything, for the fact that a door opens or somebody will help you or whatever, Why are we building in all of this in at the beginning to planning of anything? In terms of paths, design of buildings, and thinking about, and go back thinking to the fact that buildings need to be autism friendly, need to be intellectual disability friendly. They need to, not just, they need to be easy to navigate. Systems need to be easy to navigate. But, I don't want some sort of cheerleading campaign, around it. I want it to be seen that it is not on to discriminate against somebody, and
We had Lynn Rowan in a couple of weeks ago, and Lynn was saying that she class proofs legislation that comes through. She sees that as her role. Do you feel that we need somebody there who will disability proof legislation as it comes through?
Absolutely, and in fact it probably will be the role of the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission to monitor under the UN Convention. They will have a committee that's responsible for monitoring all aspects of Irish policy with regard to disability. So hopefully we're waiting for another law to pass before the Human Rights and Equality Commission can begin that work. The Disability Miscellaneous Provisions Bill of 2015.
This what an encyclopedic mind here.
So, but that's what we need. We need disability proofing. I mean, I will myself, I have the habit of when anything comes out, not necessarily anything disability related, scan through it and see what's the paragraphs. I mean, the housing plans and different things have very limited stuff on disability.
I've seen the Rebuilding Ireland, the 115 pages of Rebuilding Ireland, and I think there might be about 3 or 4 lines that touches on it in 115 pages. And and like that, I think I had to go a second reading just to find that.
And because we have segmented stuff, so the HSE say they're not responsible for housing anymore because rightly decongregation is happening in the larger institutions. So they're saying we only do the social care bit. And so the local authorities are supposed to be doing the housing bit. But there is very little joined up thinking around planning for, any of these services and supports. And very little asking of questions then as to, because we're in a crisis and everybody's affected, and the disability element of a crisis does not get reflected on. All we get is the tragic reports on the 6-1 news or the 9 o'clock news going, this is little Johnny and Johnny needs a wheelchair. Government by
Liveline.
Yeah.
Talk to Joe.
And then, the other thing is inspiration porn. Okay? Which is, look at little Johnny, and today is Leaving Cert Day. There will be the story of the disabled youngster who has overcome everything to get their X amount of A's. And well done to that youngster. And yes, they will go on to do great things. But let us know, why are we marking it out? Let us have the day when we don't mark out something because haven't they overcome everything to do whatever, and they get marked out as the overachieving, and there's that whole thing of the super crip, and we have them in Ireland, people who are only known because they're disabled.
Yes.
The media's at fault for that, the consumer of the media's at fault, the disabled person's always also at fault in some way, in that the only way they think they're going to achieve anything is to be known around their disability. You know, and like, it's just that I want a world where we do not mark that out, you know, where people can get on with their lives. And I don't want a world where people use the word ability. You know, let us talk and call it disabled. I'm very proud to be known as a disabled woman. And I don't want to be seen as somebody who's overcome X, Y, or Z either. You know, I have to embrace the disability. I want people to embrace the disability, but not just to be known for it and then be glorified for it. And then
it's interesting though, because there's two points. One is the rights-based society that we've hear more and more starting to creep into discourse, which is actually it's a serious change from where we were a decade ago to pre-crash, where we were kind of told, you know, hyper-capitalism and its consumerism and individualism. Maybe there is something that where there is a mindset change in the rights-based society. And the second thing goes back to your point, was what something Paddy Cullivan said to us months and months ago. He said, this should just be something that we just do. He, you know, when it came to these things, he said it shouldn't be something that we pat ourselves on the back on, that we go, you know, we need an RTE series of 6-part series to go through. It should be something that we just do. And I know Paddy, we were talking to him about it, and he was kind of like, you know, we were like, oh no, but you need to be, I hate to say it, you need to be rattling cans or and he was like, no, you don't. You just do it. And he's right, and you're right in what you're saying. But I feel that we're not really having that conversation properly, because we're still talking in terms of a safety net for people with disabilities and saying, you know, sure, isn't there a carers allowance, and isn't there special needs assistance, and don't they get respite care, and, you know, and we talk of it in terms of, I suppose it's othering as well.
Absolutely, and people think that mainstream education is solving all of this because people are growing up with disabled peers in school and all the rest, but you know, you talk to those disabled young people when they leave school and they leave college, and they will tell you that they've become more disabled than ever, because their non-disabled peers go off and travel the world, or, you know, go on through the rites of passage, and then the disabled person is thinking about how they would get to work, if they could get the job. You know, they're maybe lucky, they might be able to get onto some sort of special graduate entry scheme or something like that if they're lucky enough to have gone through college, but you know, they become more disabled than ever, and they are left behind. And then when the society which gives an Oscar to somebody for cripping up, you know, you don't see role models, and you know, and I hate that term, but you know, you don't see other disabled people just doing their jobs, or just owning homes, or doing those ordinary things. It has been highlighted as some sort of miracle that people get to do those sort of things.
When a society divests responsibility to charity organisations, that's the first step in othering. And it's everything after that follows. If you're not seen as mainstream enough to be regarded in the decisions that they make, in the services that they provide, that's society othering you. Not the state will perpetrate that. Everybody does. But it's how you say, well, this is just a person with a disability, there's your A to Z map, we have all these junctures that we know you're going to come across, these rites of passage, and we have these things in place. I mean, we're 100 years of society. You know,
and we used to do something like that before the National Rehabilitation Board, and it was far from perfect, but it was a one-stop shop. You had vocational officers, you know, you could talk to. That sort of structure is really needed for people to be able to link in when they need that help, rather than go, oh, which organisation should I go to? And I mean, there are HSE structures where people fund things and then they direct you to the various organisations. But the tradition in Ireland of othering, of all our social services being delivered externally, and now all through these state agreements and state provision agreements, that blurred line is really difficult then, you know, because you have all these organisations now who, how can they advocate on behalf of disabled people when you are being paid?
That's deliberate. I do think
well, it's deliberate from 2 points. It gives hands off in one direction, and it gives a level of tied agency. If I go in to give advice to someone as a qualified financial advisor, but I'm being paid by X bank on that particular day. In effect, I'm a tied agent, you know, and I can talk to the central bank all they want about, you know, giving best advice, but I've sat down in the pay of X bank, and you know, and it's very clear to me that's who pays.
Yeah,
more.
and it's one of the things I suppose I'm involved with a group of people setting up what is called a DPO, Disabled Persons Organisation, and we're trying to rebuild activism amongst people with disabilities that is independent of organisations that are paid for by the state to provide services. And what we're trying to do is train people and educate people, just peer support people across all impairment bases, and build a group that can both campaign but also monitor, report and speak out without fear.
Yes.
Okay, you know, and without that looking at that, oh, we've been funded by the government to provide this service. So, and it was like, you just feel like going back in time. For those of us who were involved in starting this up, we were around in rights movements in the 90s. I was involved in the campaign for equal status legislation after I spent time campaigning for the decriminalisation of homosexuality. You know, around all those things. And here I am, 25 years on, trying to help start up a movement where I know there are loads of very vocal people with disability. I know the people who could become vocal with the right support. You see them talking and reaching out to each other in social media. How I became sort of really interested was people who were fed up with the transport issues that they were having, and trying to amplify those voices of the fact that people couldn't go out and do things and access transport. So now we're bringing that, and we've set up a company, and we're defining membership structures, and we're reaching out to informal groups of disabled people, because there was a time where disabled people didn't socialise with each other because of mainstreaming, and also you didn't want to be around other disabled people maybe. And then other people found strength and power in numbers and are coming together. Some of them are coming together informally online, and others are regional groups or whatever. And so we're trying to bring people together and individuals, and also to learn off each other, because we got siloed as disabled people into our different disabilities.
Yeah.
And there's a pecking order in disability. Some people don't like other people with disabilities. They think like people with physical disabilities can discriminate against people with intellectual disabilities, okay? Because they are afraid of being seen as having an intellectual disability. There is stigma within disabled organisations, disabled movements. I'm naming it, I have named it before, and I've said it's an issue. I don't want to just be involved in my particular impairment group. I want to bring people together because we can learn so much off each other. So that's one of the things that I've been doing with Disabled People of Ireland, and hopefully that I won't need to be involved. There are younger people in one of the things, the referendum. So young disabled women taking their place, it's brilliant, you know, and, you know, even within the feminist and wider feminist movements, educating other women around disability, and, you know, stop making assumptions. What does access really mean? It means a lot more than just an accessible room. You know, it means the way in which you run a meeting, checking that it's accessible, the information and how it's being delivered, loads of things like that. And it's great to see younger disabled women you know, following on from whatever I might have failed on, and my peers mightn't have succeeded, but, you know, bringing those discussions into the referendum and beyond, and seeing new activists come forward, you know. Cause
it's great that you're working to get what I would call people who are outside the tent, who haven't been co-opted into anything, because they're the fearless people. They're the people who can afford to be fearless, and who can afford to campaign hard, who can afford to tell the truths that other people.
But there are also people who are very angry.
Yes.
You know, and justifiably so. And you have to try and say to people, right, you have to pick your battles. That's the other thing, you know, and you're trying to say, you know, choose what you campaign on and how you do it. And mind yourself. Exhaustion. And that was one of the things that happened to a whole cohort of disabled activists, is that they were exhausted by the battles. And we lost some really good people in the last 5 years who were leading us, minding us all. And then a few of us that were remaining going, we have to do something, because we know there's a cohort of younger people who, because we're still in the charity mode hugely in how we are perceived. You know, younger people are fitting into that charity mode rather than questioning it, and are afraid to question it, and don't have expectations. Because they're told, you should be grateful for what you have, rather than there is another way.
And these are the channels, and you're going to swim in these channels, as opposed to actually break the mold as such. it's endemic in many of the ways we do. With Martin, we speak about people getting captured by systems that they don't even realize that they're in, and quite often, it's conversations that we have now that, we take away and we understand things a bit better, we process them better. But I can only say that at the nub of it for me is where we need to almost shake a few people and understand that a rights-based society is actually to the benefit of everyone. It doesn't matter about your ideology or your political spectrum or where you stand on that. Everybody will benefit if we can actually all contribute. And I don't mean that in the sense of, oh look, you're not contributing. It just means in the sense of, there's more value in actual quality of life for everyone,
and that includes the people that you may think can't contribute.
Yeah.
And I think also it's really important to recognise there are people for whom their disability is so significant that they cannot say what they want. And we need to ensure that there are people there and not necessarily presume it is their family as well, because some families won't want to do it, continually care and make decisions and support people who have so many needs. We need to look at that sector, ensuring that their voices are heard in those campaigns, but also that we don't make presumptions because they cannot speak or have difficulty communicating, that everything should be decided for them in a certain way and in a rote way of provision as well. And so it's a very broad church, but that means it's rights for everybody. We have to take that design rather than just for those who can't speak out, as well.
I think, particularly with the transport role, we're seeing that there are some changes coming. I mean, to think that we had X amount of years where people were planning transport for people who had a disability, yet they never spoke to anybody who had a disability. And that's where we have to get to, is where there's actual involvement, where there's actually people like yourself who can sit and say, no, that won't work, or we need to do this. But transport is just a very, very small aspect. And it's
but it shouldn't just be on the heads of the disabled people. And I think that's one of the things that I want to get out, is that, yes, I am a director on a public board.
Does that not fix everything?
No, it doesn't. No, it definitely doesn't. And for the 4 others who are on the other boards as well, we are not there to be the fixer of everything that's there. We're there to ask questions. That's primarily your role as a board member, right? Yes, I have obligations legally and accounts and money and all of those sort of things, but definitely.
I saw the Merc outside.
Oh yeah, right. So, I'm just there. I'm there to ask questions. But every other director has that responsibility as well. There are access groups and access officers within these companies, but I think they are sometimes thought of as an add-on and an afterthought of consulting afterwards. How, when we are buying new trains, are we thinking around disability? Are we future-proofing? Because people's access needs are much different and their abilities, because of assistive technology, are different. Chairs are bigger. We live longer. Now, we just put that out. I often say it and people go, why is she talking about this? But actually, it wasn't expected that many people with disabilities would live as long. And because health systems have improved, we have lived longer and we've become an inconvenience because we are alive longer. And then we are able to do more things and if we get access to the right things in terms of wheelchairs, but wheelchairs are bigger. The mobility scooters, huge issue in public transport in the UK. A little bit of an issue here in Ireland, could become a bigger issue if people have expectations that they need to go further or whatever, and all those discussions have to be held. And as a director, I will be asking the questions, but I won't be able to fix things. I might, hopefully with the questions I ask and with the support of colleagues and other directors, and they're educating them that, decisions can be made about infrastructure and how they plan. But I'm not saying, we won't get every train platform and level with every carriage.
That's
a huge issue.
You know the platform in Kent Station, the way it turns.
Oh,
you're not straight in that.
You know, it's like that's it's really difficult to think about the fact that you have different types of trains, different platforms. You're relying on human beings. There's error in that always, but and that's in terms of the physical stuff, but also, people on the autism spectrum would like quiet carriages to travel on. But actually lots of able-bodied people would love to have quiet carriages too.
Absolutely.
Let's have those conversations about designing systems and wanting to have services that are accessible for lots of people and benefit everybody, But it's not something I'm realistic. It's the first time that this has been done and I think it should be, I think people with disabilities who have the requisite experience in terms of, can meet financial background or management or HR background, but also have a disability, should be involved in HSE boards, all these other state boards. We're forming a new board for the HSE, I think, if they're going to go back to that again, and should have people on those boards who have disabilities as well. This is it's an experiment what I'm part of now, but also I'm not there to make things wonderful overnight.
Yeah, well, it seems that we have stumbled a step backwards from where we were maybe in the late 90s. We have stumbled a step backwards. And now there's an opportunity to take steps forwards again. Are you confident that we as a society, our state, our government are capable of doing that?
I'm not confident really, because I think there's been we're moving into this thing that if people with disabilities get a job, they'll be fine. There's a whole thing of work will make you non-disabled. Your disability doesn't disappear when you get a job if you're lucky enough to get a job. There's a cost to disability, and unfortunately what the government have been concentrating on is the area of work and disability rather than life. Housing, they think if people have jobs they get housing, but they still have a disability, and that needs to be planned into the cost, taxation allowances or other schemes, so that people, we need to think about these things wider, and
what was it an IDE, the income deficit thing that you did in the States 30 years ago, where people who say they were working, but because of their cost of living, that they got tax rebates, and it made life more bearable. That they paid their taxes every year, but every year, then a few months later, the IRS or whatever it was at the time gave them back a grant that fulfilled some of their needs. I always say this. All of the solutions to our problems exist. It's the implementation that we usually lack, and these sort of things are very possible.
And the language we use around these things is really harmful. We talk about traps, benefit traps. That's a really negative way of presenting things. My disability doesn't go away because I have a job. I'm very lucky to have a job, and it keeps me well, but I'm also able to afford to cover the things that I have lost. I have to pay for all my medical care. I even have to pay for my assistive equipment. I'm not entitled to anything. I do worry about what happens when, if I'm not able to keep that job. There's that, and the working disabled don't get talked about in lots of this stuff either, and so it's everybody who's affected. And I think to go back to what you were saying about the late 90s and what people were talking about, the fact that we've moved backwards, it's because it is a reactive society that we're in, rather than planning for everything.
Yeah, and more than most societies, I think Ireland's we constantly playing catch up in dealing with the problems of the past that were never solved, and it doesn't give us the focus on where we're going for the future. It just doesn't give us any focus. It's constant firefighting, constant, and you can't plan anything in firefighting. You just can't.
And if the only announcements you're hearing about are for residential care and respite, and that's all that would be heard because they are the loudest voices that are being heard at that time between the organisations campaigning for extra money so they can provide service to the carers who are got louder voices than the people being cared for, then we are never going to change that. And that's why I'm quite down about it, but that's where there's a call to arms to disabled people and allied supporters to say enough is enough in this, that we need to change how we deliver services, plan service, and recognise people with disabilities.
Funny you say that, because you're saying you're a little bit down about it, and yet I'm more optimistic after this 40 minutes of a conversation, because I'm already thinking in a broader sense. I'm already thinking about, little platforms, little things that we can do and talk to people in different ways, and how we can try and get that message out there, because it actually is a conversation that I haven't had before. I haven't thought in those terms before, and I'm pretty sure that you'll give other people reason to be more optimistic as well. So I don't know. I think just from my point of view, I think it's really powerful what you've said.
Okay, thanks very much. And I hope other people will think about those things and challenge the narrative that they're hearing externally, challenge the politician that is fundraising for their service up the road, rather than checking that policies are disability approved and that laws are implemented. Because politicians when they see disability, they go, oh, that service is really good, I'm going to throw a tenner in, or I'm going to do Strictly Come Dancing, or whatever it is, absolutely, and we need to challenge people on that.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time out to talk. It's been a really interesting conversation. I know you enjoyed it too, Tony.
I did, and I think everybody who's listening, we need to open up the conversation. We need to talk about a rights-based society and what that really means and how inclusive that is. Suzy, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, and I know I got a lot out of it, and I'm sure the listeners will as well.
Yeah, well, I did. I certainly did. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks, for listening. Do hit us up. Any questions, drop us a line on Twitter. Anything, you can email us. You can get us on EchoChamberPod.com. Go on to wherever you get to subscribe, and let your friends know, and do leave us a review. That'd be great. Thanks. Bye-bye.